Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here today with Representative Ray Bunt, who has served the 147th Legislative District from Montgomery County between the years 1983 and is currently serving this legislative session, which is 2006. Thank you for being here again with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's a very humbling experience for me to be here.
Well, I certainly want to begin by asking you about your childhood and your family life and how they worked to prepare you for public service.
Well, frankly, I never imagined when I was younger that I would be here. My father was stationed in Puerto Rico during the Second World War, so that's where I was born. And my mother is Spanish and French and was a native of Puerto Rico. And we were 3 months, I was 3 months old when my dad got transferred from there. And we traveled around quite a bit because my dad was in the military until 1946. And my early childhood was spent in Trooper, which is a suburb of Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is the county seat of Montgomery County. And except for a brief period where we had moved to Florida for about a year, all of my life has been in Montgomery County. And attended local schools, graduated from Schwenksville, they called it Schwenksville Area High School, and it was so big that we had 43 or 44 in our graduating class. So, but up until the time, I guess fourth grade, we all came up here on class trips, and you know, I think every kid dreams whenever they do something that they'd like to experience it. And whether you go to the Franklin Institute or the Civil War Museum, you try to put yourself, I know I talk to my grandkids and they say the same thing. And I remember distinctly coming up here and just looking around and the grandeur, because up until that point, this probably was the most beautiful building that I'd ever been in. And it was just, it was a one-day experience. Oh, maybe I'll be a state representative one day. I never thought about it again. And after I left high school, I got married very early. I was just shy of 20 when I got married. I had 2 children by the time I was 21. And then went to college at night, so did things in reverse. I married my high school sweetheart, but we didn't stay sweethearts forever. But we did have 2 beautiful children, and we remained friends. I went into business for myself. I met some representatives of a small oil company in New Jersey by the name of DePolito Fuel Oil Company, who were also doing business with a small company called Hess Oil. And they were starting to market gasoline in the mid-'60s. And I needed a part-time job with 2 kids, in addition to a full-time job because my wife stayed at home. And I went to work for them on a part-time basis, and I worked, I guess, maybe 6 months, when a district manager of Hess Oil came and said, we're going to open up some retail outlets, and would you be interested in maybe being a dealer for us? And I kind of laughed and I said, you know, I really don't have any money. I'm 21 years old, 22, and I don't have any money. And they said, well, we'd like you to come down and meet with some folks that are in our business. And I met Leon Hess. Leon Hess, who I will tell you later, owned the New York Jets. But at that time, he didn't have quite the money that he had afterwards. And Mr. Hess said to me, he said, can you borrow $500? And I said, yeah, I could probably borrow $500, but you know, remember now in the 60s, that was a lot of money. I was clearing like $50, $60 a week, you know, so that was a lot of money. I went to my mom and dad, and you know, they helped me, and I went to my wife's grandparents, and they helped. And I said to Mr. Hess, but I can't go into business with $500. He said, well, I want you to open a checking account. I want you to put that $500 in there. And I said, okay. And so then he said, give me a call when that occurs. So I did. So we met again, and he said, okay, now I want you to give me a check for $3,000. And I said, I can't do that. It'll bounce. He said, I'm not going to cash it until you start making money. And so basically he put me in business. And I tell that story a great deal because Connie Williams, as a state senator here, was elected to the House from Montgomery County in Lower Merion, and was a colleague of mine. And I approached her and I told her the story, and I told her that I knew her when she was younger, and her brother, and it was an amazing story, you know. And it helped me get started in life. It really helped me a great deal. I never stopped working 7 days a week, and I frankly haven't. And hopefully November 30th I can. So that's basically the early part of my life. There's lots of things that happened there, but I think that experience in business was had a profound. It left a profound impression upon me, because I not only operated service stations, but had automotive service shops, franchise shops. I owned a restaurant, and they were always dealing with people. And I always found that the nicer I was to people, the nicer they were in return. Mm-hmm. And I learned something very early on that I was able to train my employees with, that when somebody came for our services or for a product, treat them like their family. And when the phone rings, make believe it's your mother and she needs your help. And if you do that, you always have a job and I'll always have my business. And I did the same thing when I entered the State House, and I've been here 24 years. 12 elections, 9 of them uncontested. Again, I had to work 7 days a week for it, but I enjoyed working with people. I still do. I just love the opportunity to help somebody if I can. And I think if you listen to people, sometimes they provide their own remedy. They just need somebody to talk it out with. But in those cases where they can't, they need somebody to be an advocate for them. And I think if you try, in 90% of cases, you really can help somebody, given the position. It's not me, it's the position and the position that I hold, which gives me access to be able to be of assistance. And that's probably one of the things I'm going to miss when I leave here, is picking that phone up and being able to get somebody on the phone. Not because it's Ray Bunt, but because it's Representative Ray Bunt. And, but I'm going to remain the same person, and I'm going to try to pick that phone up and try anyway. So it's been a wonderful experience. It's been a wonderful experience. And that business background and that small town upbringing certainly laid the foundation for the successes that I've had in political life.
Well, speaking of political life, was anyone in your family involved in politics?
My grandfather, during the 20s and 30s, which were the Depression, was active as a precinct captain and used to help the local Republican ward leaders, and was a ward leader himself in Philadelphia during the Depression. And at that time, he used to be going door to door to try to help people to understand what was going on with issues at that time, and he had the access to city council members and state representatives and state senators. And I asked him why he stopped, and it was just a depression. It was a depression where he had to get a job that paid something, and it was very difficult. He became a huckster. He used to go door to door, selling eggs and butters and butter and chickens and apple cider, whatever people could afford. Sometimes they could only afford to buy 2 eggs. And that's how bad things were, and it's hard to comprehend. I know when he used to tell me the stories when I was little, it was beyond comprehension that people could only buy 2 eggs or 1/4 pound of butter. But they did. They did. And that's how he got by. And I never gave any thought to that political life that he had, other than a life's experience. Mm-hmm. And it certainly wasn't an aspiration of mine to get involved politically. I went to a township meeting when I was about 23 or 24, 25, somewhere in that area. And I had read something in the paper that I was somewhat concerned about, the way it was written in the newspaper, and I went to a township meeting, and I sat there very attentively until the end of the council meeting, when a supervisor's meeting, when they said, does anybody have a question? And I had the newspaper in front of me, and I said, I do have a question. And I said, I'm very concerned about what I've read in the newspaper concerning some zoning issues that you folks are about to embark upon. And they said, oh, what are you concerned about? And I talked about different things that were in the story, and I found out at that meeting that not what's written in the newspaper is always accurate. And that amazed me, because the reporter was in the audience that night too at the subsequent meeting, and it was just how people view what's said sometimes and how it's presented. And I learned very early on that unless these people print a Bible, boy, you better get your own answers.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you become a Republican?
I always was a Republican because I was a business person. And I believed in limited government, and I believed in taking care of those who could not take care of themselves. But I also was not in favor of an expansive government of cradle-to-grave type assistance, because I always viewed that as a problem for people of being able to go out on their own. Because I always viewed cradle-to-grave government as socialism. And that if you didn't give people an incentive to work, then they wouldn't. If everything was provided for, a very large percentage, this is the way I thought at the time, okay? So, that if you didn't, if there weren't things out there that were challenges, then people could not rise to the top. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I became a Republican, and I don't think it was some profound thing that occurred. It was not somebody who sat down with me and talked to me, well, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you need to be a Republican because these guys are bad. That never occurred. It was just a natural assimilation based upon my life's experiences up to that point, and the profound experience I had as a businessman dealing with regulations and paying people to fill out forms to send them off to state agencies or federal agencies, and I saw that as cumbersome. Mm-hmm. I saw it as cumbersome, and I saw it as duplication and duplicity, and it just appeared to me we were just making jobs. Mm-hmm. And somebody was paying the bill for those jobs. And that, but you know, I have changed since those days, and I do know that government can do good too, and it needs to exist. but it does not need to be big. And it does not need to grow as fast as the private sector. I think the private sector needs to grow. If you have good government, you're going to have good politics. You have good politics, you should have good government as well. And so that's the way I always tried to apply myself.
Your first public office was as chief clerk of Montgomery County Board of Elections. Was that a...
That was a paid position. My first position happened locally. The township supervisors had appointed me to the local planning commission. And then my colleagues appointed me to be chairman of that over a year or two. And then the county commissioners, I had some interaction with the county commissioners based upon that local political activity. And then they appointed me to the county planning commission. And that's how it worked, that's how it started. And so I always seemed to have been someplace maybe I shouldn't have been. Because serving in local government, you serve at your own expense, and you serve at your own time. When you do that, your family does suffer, your family does sacrifice, and that which you spend comes out of your pocket. And when you're a young person trying to raise kids, you have to make a decision whether you want to do that, continue to do that, or move on. And that serves and acts as a disincentive. Fortunately for me, I was a business person, so my income was a little bit higher than somebody else. And so that's what I did. And then I became a committee man locally, worked the elections, precinct captain, like Grandpapa had been. And lo and behold, I was asked by the chairman of the county commissioners of Montgomery County, which is the third largest county in this Commonwealth, to serve as director of elections, the chief clerk to the county commissioners. And it was something I did not want to turn down because of how I viewed the county commissioners withal. And there was a chairman of the county commissioners, Russ Parkhouse at that time, who I viewed as a father figure for the whole county. And he was one that people and elected officials saw as a parent. When I look back now, he wasn't all that old, but he was to me at that point. But yeah, he seemed to want to protect the county. He seemed to want to serve it well. And everybody that I ever saw that he had appointed were like him. And so I viewed that the same way. I thought, boy, even if it costs me to do this, I guess I have to do it, you know? I want to do it, you know? And didn't pay a great deal of money either, you know? But I had my business, so again, it was okay. And lo and behold, I was there about 3 years, and during that time, prior to serving as director of elections, I had become involved in campaigns for governor, for Drew Lewis, who was a candidate for, he was a Republican candidate for governor in a 1974 election. And had always been at rallies for candidates from president all the way down to the township supervisors. Had worked in campaigns as chairman or treasurer for my predecessors in my existing position. When Ronald Reagan was sworn in as President of the United States, this particular person, Drew Lewis, who had been the Republican candidate for governor and did not win, was asked by Ronald Reagan to be Secretary of Transportation in his administration. Nice feather in the cap for Montgomery County. And in addition, we had another cabinet member from Montgomery County, Richard Stryker, who had been a U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania. He also served in the cabinet. So that was two from Montgomery County. And then there was a third, Secretary John Lehman of the Navy. He also was from Montgomery County and was a relative of Grace Kelly, the actress. In addition to Alexander Haig, also was from Lower Marion Township in Montgomery County. I thought, I was in awe myself. I knew all these people, but for them to serve at the national level at the same time. Drew Lewis's wife, Marilyn, was my immediate predecessor, and she was in her second term. And she needed to be in Washington a great deal to be with her husband. So I got a call from Drew Lewis. He said, Marilyn's not running again, and he had been very active politically in Montgomery County, former county chairman. And he said, you're running, just like that. And I said, excuse me. This is something I have to consider. This is something I need to discuss with my wife and my kids. I said, he said, you can do what you want to do, but you said you have to run. Okay, Drew, okay. I went home, I discussed it, and my wife said, if that'll make you happy, we want you to do it. So that's where I'm at.
So you had the support of your family.
Oh, absolutely. You could not serve here without the total 100% support, especially if you have to travel to get here. My colleagues from Pittsburgh or Erie or Philadelphia, you cannot travel back and forth every day. I mean, it's a minimum of 4 to 5 hours travel every day. You just can't do it. And to those that come from Erie and Pittsburgh, and I'll have to tell you the distance from the capital, and choose up half a day, if not more, or 3/4 of a day. So you can't travel back and forth. So you're here 3-4 days a week. And this place has been my second home. I actually have a second home here, in addition to being here as a representative. And my colleagues they're an extension of my family, so it's very difficult. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to make that decision when you're going to retire, when you're going to move on. And I thought I had my decision made up in 2003, and I left people talk me out of it. So I ran in 2004, and then around Thanksgiving of last year, I said to my family, I said, this is what I want to do, but I don't want you to tell anybody. And so I told my national committee man here, Bob Asher, because he was the first person I had discussed it with other than Drew Lewis when I first ran. And my family and my in-laws, because we always go down to their place for Thanksgiving. And they all said, well, sit on it, sit on it, sit on it. And I said, well, my decision's pretty final, I said, So I didn't announce it until December 31st, I guess, New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I haven't looked back either. You get a little melancholy, but if they truly are an extension of my family, I'll come back to see them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to take a step back and ask you about your first campaign run. Now that you've been told you're going to run for office and you have the support of your family.
I had the support of my family.
What was your first campaign like?
My first campaign was pretty easy now when I look what other people are going through and experiencing. My first opponent, I wound up with a Republican primary. I had the complete support and endorsement of the entire Republican organization in my district and in the county. But nevertheless, somebody else wanted the job too. And so that was a complete surprise to me because it was somebody who I'd went to high school with too. Albeit a little older than I was at the time, but so I knew what campaigns were about, but I swore I was not going to be involved in personal attacks, nor would I respond to them. And I didn't have that problem with my primary opponent at that time. His name was Richard Schlick, S-C-H-L-I-C-K. And he was a gentleman, and I hope I was too. I did extremely well in the primary. I won better than 2-1. And there was a Democratic candidate who was a school teacher and a Democratic leader in the upper Perkiomen Valley area of the district that I serve. And her husband was president of the National School Boards Association. And she was a well-respected teacher, now retired, in the Upper Perkiomen Valley School District. Her name was Joan Smith. At the time, she was somewhat of a caustic individual, at least at that point I thought, and I told her so. But she was just being what she thought she had to do as a candidate. There was some subtle inferences that bordered on being a personal race, but it never got blown out of proportion. Not on my part, on her part. And we were able to reconcile lots of things during the campaign. And when we looked at it, about 2 weeks out of the election, she and I agreed on the majority of issues as they confronted our district. But there's certain tenets of the Democratic Party and certain tenets of the Republican Party with it about less government, more government, and that's about the only thing that was an obstacle in us agreeing on the majority of issues. We ultimately became good friends, and I've got lots of notes from her from different things that I've done, and she sent me nice notes, she and her husband. And I went on to win that general election in a bad year, 1982. When I say it was a bad year, Dick Thornburgh was running for his first re-elect here in Pennsylvania, and nationally the economy was going through a recession. And Dick Thornburgh almost did not win re-election. And I was running for my first election. But we won handily, and I was a top vote getter. And then a couple of years later, 1984, Ronald Reagan was running for his second term, and he was extremely popular in that election, '84. And the Democrats drew the best candidate could at me. His name was James Maza, M-A-Z-A, and was then and still is a local attorney, a Democrat in a Republican area. And so, but he went to high school there. Everybody liked him. But they said, Jim, what are you doing as a Democrat? But in his heart, he was a Democrat. He was he wasn't a George McGovern Democrat. He was a Roosevelt Truman Democrat. And he was, and he is what he is, a good person. And again, we became good friends through the campaign as well. And he goes on to tell the stories about how he got shellacked, and he did. He got 22% of the vote, and I got 78%. My first re-elect, and as popular as Ronald Reagan was, I led the ticket again, and in my district. And
And you haven't had very many campaigns?
No, I really haven't. I had one other Democrat candidate, I think in '92. And then I had a spattering of constitutional candidates, libertarian. I think it was primarily libertarian. And they didn't disagree with me on anything. I think they just put their name on a ballot. And so I really never had an intense campaign except for those two, and maybe in '92. Got to be a little intense, but never embattled. I never felt embattled. And certainly, you know, people bring up whatever they can bring up during an election. And sometimes, you know, you get disheartened and think, yeah, I don't want to be subject to this, but it never got that bad.
Were some of your techniques knocking on doors or anything?
I knocked on doors, I made telephone calls, I had signs up everywhere, I was very active in social organizations, and I just would ask people, can I put a sign on your lawn? I was not content with just putting signs up in rights-of-ways and open fields. I asked people, and frankly, it made a difference. When somebody lets you put a sign on their lawn, or they give you $10 towards your campaign, they're hard-pressed to vote against you. And so, and they're not. They're going to vote for you, you know. So, my vote totals were always good, and I never wanted to embarrass myself or my family, because the area that I represent is the area I grew up in and went to school in.
Do you remember how much it cost to run your first campaign?
Yes, I do. It was about $55,000. It was very expensive. In those days, dollars. And that's between the primary and the general. I had 2 elections. And primarily that was postage and printing and signs, and I had a couple of campaign assistants that, you know, I reimbursed them for the cost of their gas and lunches and that type of thing. And that was about the going rate then, between $40,000 and $60,000. And there were a couple of elections after that in Montgomery County, not mine, but elections that people spent $250,000 between the 2 candidates. And I thought, oh my God, that's so much money. Now they're multi-million-dollar races for legislature. And that is disheartening too, because no one works for anything, for nothing. And you have campaign consultants, there's printing companies, even a postage stamp is 39 cents. And you have to have a computer, and everything that we do around here to make things more transparent, you have to hire somebody to do it so it is transparent. And so that costs a lot of money. And I don't know where it's going. I guess every old timer talks about it. I don't know where it's going. I guess if you put it in today's dollars, what I spent back then, I guess today would be, I guess it would be 4 or 5 to 1. I guess it would.
I would like to ask you about your district now. Can you talk a little bit about the 147th?
It was.
How it has changed too, because...
Yeah. Montgomery County in 1982 had 11 legislative districts. My district, the 147th, consisted of 1/5 of the geographic size of Montgomery County. So I had colleagues who were representing much smaller districts. Geographically, we all had the same population density, but mine was 1/5 of the county. And I didn't quite have as many dairy cows as I had people, but almost. And that's no longer the case. I only have about a dozen dairy farms, and none of them very large. I guess maybe the largest, maybe about 160 cows. And I've just seen so many of them just go out of business, or kids didn't want to stay with the farm. Land values have increased so much that they could make more money selling their ground and putting the money in and getting interest than milking cows or raising chickens. We always had a large food production, like Hatfield packing, pork products, Moyer packing. Moyer packing during its heyday used to process 1,700 cattle a day for meat. And Hatfield packing used to process around 7,000 hogs a day. And we had chicken production, we had egg production to a large scale. Keller butter, all in my district. And those that remain have gotten smaller in size because when farmers go out of business or they sell their land, all the associated services go as well. The John Deere dealer doesn't sell any tractors anymore, or combines, or hay balers. But we grew houses instead. And that, again, presents other problems. And that's been about the most disheartening thing that I've seen, is the land being gobbled up. I know everybody needs to live somewhere, but the sprawl is just uncontrollable. And the demand for services has increased to such a point that the cost of providing those services make people mad, because they demand the services but don't want to pay the taxes to pay them. And they believe that when they build a house or bought a house, that the $3,000 in property taxes they pay should cover everything. Well, in Montgomery County, it costs about $11,000 to educate each child. And so if you're getting $3,000 out of somebody's house and they got 2.3 kids, because that's the average out of a development, you can see you'll never recover. And so senior citizens are going to have to pay more taxes, people on fixed income. In 1982, the senior citizen population in my district was about 18.5%. It's now down below 6%. So they've gotten squeezed out. Of course, they can't afford the taxes. And so it's a high growth area for homes. And we've got quality schools, but they cost money. And the cost of education is increasing faster than the ability of local government and state government to keep up with it without imposing more taxes. And people want good education. They want the best schools. They want their children to get the quality education. They want smaller class sizes, but they do not want to pay the taxes. And a great deal of finger pointing going on. While the state should provide more, the state has no control over what's spent in a local school district. And I think it's silly and absurd to think that we can keep pace with that type of increase in spending on a year-to-year basis that exceeds the cost of living. Because the same people that want all those also want us to hold our line and hold about here too. So it's frustrating to know what the issues are, to know how to address them, but can't.
Well, the 147th has appeared, at least historically, to be a fairly firm Republican district. As you mentioned before, Marilyn Lewis held the seat, and before her, I think it...
Dr. G. Seaver Pankos, who was a professor of political science at Ursinus College.
Yeah.
He held the seat from 64 to 78, Maryland from 78 to 82, and so for 42 years it's been 3 Republicans. There will be another Republican who will win in next month, November. But beyond that, things are changing, and they're changing very quickly in Philadelphia and the suburbs. And for what reason, it's hard to pinpoint. But things run their cycle. The same thing occurred in Philadelphia in the late 30s up until 1950. There was Republican control in Philadelphia up until it started around 1936 with the election of George Earl, a Democrat from Montgomery County, to be governor. And there was an erosion of Republican government in Philadelphia that started out slow, a slow erosion, and then accelerated and accelerated and accelerated up until 1950, when Richardson Dilworth and a fellow by the name of Clark, Joe Clark, won in Philadelphia. And I don't think there's been a Republican that's been elected down there to be mayor since. They've had a controller who's been a Republican and a DA or an inspector who was a Republican, but most of the roll-ups. And so this same acceleration has been occurring in the suburban counties. It started out slow, it's accelerating, and I see it gaining speed. The more homes that we're building, the people are completely different, and most of them from Philadelphia. So they abandoned Philadelphia. They abandoned Philadelphia, and are very, when they move out into the suburbs, are very upset at the politics of where they came from, but they bring their same voting patterns out to the suburbs, and that's what's going on.
Can you talk a little bit about the camaraderie in the House? You mentioned it, or you alluded to it a little bit before. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that now.
Well, people have referred to me as a character up here, but and I probably am. But I've served with some very interesting people, people who are still here, who were here when I came in. Bill DeWeese, Gaynor Cawley, Tommy Tighe, and for whatever other, they're still here. A Jim Mandarino, a Matt Ryan, people that I've shared a great deal with over the years, laughs and concerns. And they're just a small part of the list. I mean, if I were just to have a list here in front of me, I could tell you a story about every one of them, and they could tell you a story about me too. And but over the years, there's been an erosion of that too, a camaraderie amongst us. We used to fight like cats and dogs when we got in here and were in session, and debate, interrogation. The interrogation was civil, but it was heated, but it was always civil. And there was a nightlife up here at that time too, and it was not. It was an unusual night where you didn't run into, oh my goodness, 15, 20 colleagues on any given night. At one of the local watering holes or restaurants, watering holes after restaurant. And you'd share a story or a cigar or a cigarette, different times. And a newspaper reporter or a newspaper publisher. We had publishers who served here in those days. And I don't know if it's me who's changed or whether the times have changed, but I've seen an erosion of that camaraderie. It's very difficult to find people out at night now. You can go to virtually every restaurant in town and you may run into one or two people, and it's usually the same one or two people you'd run into next week too. And you lose something if you don't have that after-hours camaraderie, in my opinion. Because if you have that after-hours camaraderie, a part of it comes into the day work too, you see. There's an element of trust that begins to establish itself. And it's amazing how much you can get done when there's trust between people who work together. You get to know a person's other district, why they think the way they do, because you have more time after hours. And if something occurred during the day, you would say, well, why did you vote that way? You know, are you nuts? Well, no, I'm not nuts. You know, I have a plant over here that's about to close, and it has 1,800 people there. It just so happens, you know, I got a next-door neighbor, I got people up the street, I've got people that are active in my campaigns, I've got somebody to, and all of this has an impact because I hear them talk about what's going on. And I need to do this and I need to do that in order to make provisions to either keep them a viable company in the area or to provide some job transition grants or retraining, all of which is more government, you see. Mm-hmm. And when you hear that, when you know that, then you understand somebody better, you see. Mm-hmm. When you understand somebody better, they don't have to look at the ground after they made a vote that they ordinarily would not have made, because they know you know. Okay? Now, I'm concerned that maybe some folks that got elected and have been elected in the last 10 or 12 years don't have enough life's experiences. Not that they're not good people, they're good people. But I'm concerned they haven't had the adequate background they need to be here. I think you can't have all academics. You can't have all governmental expats here. You need to have a blend of housewives, of fathers, of couples, of somebody who's had a business, somebody who's lost a job. Everybody brings something to the blend here. Everybody can tell a story of life's experiences that if you want to listen, you'll learn. And I don't think we should allow people to come in here at 21 years of age. You know, I just don't think that should occur. You know, somebody will take issue with this, but I think you should have learned how to make a payroll first, know what it's like to give birth first, know what it's like to pay your employees first and you get what's left over. I think you need to serve here having had a job and got fired from a job. Their life's experiences. And I don't know if we have those kinds of members coming in now. I'm pretty high in seniority in our caucus, and they're all good people coming in. As I said, don't get me wrong. They're all good people coming in, but if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, in order to succeed, you need to be part of a team, because a team is an organization. And if you have an organization, it can only succeed if there's a certain amount of discipline. Not the kind of discipline somebody raps you against the side of the head. But you need to know that there's some things you need to do for the good of the all, not the good of just you. So the lessons that you should learn is that you first come up here to be a representative of your district. You next then need to know that you're a member of that particular caucus. And then you are also a state representative. So there's some things that you need to do for the good of the Commonwealth, and not for your own political viability. I don't think there's a vote that can be made up here that is that bad that you're going to lose if you know why you made that vote and try to defend it, okay? If you don't do enough research before you make a vote up here, then how can you defend it? And how can you make a vote, and how can you decide to equate what you're going to do if you have no life's experiences? And so I've been blessed. I've got friends on both sides of the aisle. I would jump in the Susquehanna River to save any one of them. There's something about each and every one of them that I can find that's good, and I hope that they feel the same way about me.
Were you so wise whenever you started in 1983?
No.
Did you have mentors? And who have you mentored through the years?
Oh, my.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, a mentor sometimes provides a service without he or she knowing it. And that usually is the case here. I didn't always agree with Matthew J. Ryan, who was the speaker, our late speaker, or a Jim Mandarino, or a K. Leroy Irvis. Or I was a student of what went on in Pennsylvania politics because I was an avid reader and I was always interested, you know, when I was active politically. a Herb Feynman or a Cianfrani. They were all legends. They were all characters, and whether you agreed with them or not, they certainly gave you some valuable lessons of things they did right and things they did wrong, and it helps you. Bill DeWeese, you know, when I first came here, I thought he was a buffoon and a clown, but it didn't take me long to know that that was not the case, you know, and I'm sure others saw me the same way. But it can take you a lot longer if you don't come here with some basic skills, and that's why I'm very concerned that there's people that come here without those kinds of building blocks, if you will. And I'm sure somebody will have another opinion about it, but that's just the way I feel. And it's been my life's experience in viewing everything that I've seen here in 24 years. Everybody has been a mentor to me because I've learned something from each and every one of them. When I made a decision not to run again, I mean, you know, I don't know, just people that I didn't know I was making a difference to left me know that I did. One as recently as last night, Dave Millard, only a second term or one term, came into my office and he said, "Ray, can I get a picture of you and I together?" And for what, Dave? I mean, we haven't really been that especially close, you know. He's a very quiet man, a hard worker. And he said some things that just knocked me off my chair almost, you know. And that's occurred with a great deal of frequency. That kind of pay is worth more than being a millionaire, you know? Mm-hmm. That you've been a good teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Senator Wunderling has gone on record as listing you as being a mentor as well.
And that's nice as well.
Yeah. Do you recall how you felt the first time you were sworn in as a member?
I was in awe. I was not cocky at all. I was only 30. I guess I was 38 when I got sworn in. And my dad was here. My dad's now passed away, and he was just so proud. And I remember the first time I sat in my chair before the festivities started. There was flowers all around, and I kind of like leaned back and I was looking up, and I had to pinch myself. I really did, and I still do. It's just me here, you know. Am I worthy of being here, you know? And it's a very humbling experience. And every time I found myself getting too smart for my own pants, that sitting in that chair and looking around and looking at the apotheosis in the back and not pinching yourself again brought you back, you know? Because there is a tendency of thinking you know everything. Mm-hmm. You only know a little bit more than somebody else, maybe, in one little given area, but you don't know it all. And you may know more about what went on up here today than your neighbor who's just watching PCN, but you may not know as much as that person does, okay? So if you can get a hold of yourself, grab yourself every now and then, and get back, you'll be okay. But I think it's been more humbling than anything. More humbling than anything. In our desk drawers, I think for every new member they should put a copy of the U.S. Constitution, a copy of the Pennsylvania Constitution, and a history of the apotheosis and the characters behind the speaker, just to see who they are and what their background was. Not just a picture, this is Ben Franklin, that, you know, that's DeWitt, you know, that's William Penn. No, just a little 2-paragraph summary about each and every one of those individuals and their background, and the history of this building, and the history of the Commonwealth since 1681. That would be a big help to those who think they may know it all.
Do you remember your first office when you came to Harrisburg? What it was like, where it was?
Yeah, it was in this building. And it was at the top of the stairs, room 123, I believe. And they gave me the office because it was my predecessor's, Marilyn Lewis. And I came in this building, and you know, the staircases out here that you know, I mean, they're impressive if you come from someplace else, you know. If you don't work here every day, it's impressive. Even at the building in its deteriorating condition at the time. And that first term, I spent a lot of nights in my office because the days are so hectic that you really do have to come back to your office at night to answer mail, draft letters, return some phone calls, and get your thoughts ready for the following day. And I'd never had an office like that. And I had good staff, and I now know that it wasn't the best office in the Capitol.
You have a very nice office.
I have a very lovely office right now. And there are folks that come in and say, oh boy, when I get elected, I'm going to get an office like this. I said, yeah, but it's going to take 20 years. So it wasn't done for me, it's done for the seniority, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the amount of activity that you're involved in. But the present office that I have was where my secretarial staff sits now, housed my office and my secretary. So it was quite smaller then. So, but there's meetings that are held there, and so that's why the chairmen get bigger offices and what have you. But it's seniority more than anything else.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the committees that you have served on, which are numerous.
I've served on quite a few of the committees, health and welfare, game and fisheries when I first came here, state government, finance committee, which is the tax writing committee. I was on the appropriations committee. I chaired the House Agriculture Committee. I chaired the Consumer Affairs Committee. You know,
Liquor control.
Liquor control
Consumer
committee.
affairs. Yeah.
Not all of them, but an overriding majority of those. 24 years is a long time.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the issues that came in front of you as chairman of, or some of the more interesting issues that came.
Some of the more interesting, as a chairman, House Agriculture Committee, it is the #1 industry in the Commonwealth, and so it wasn't the type of background that I had as to chair the Ag Committee, so I had to be a student first. And I had a lot of help. I had great staff. I had worked with all the agricultural associations throughout the Commonwealth. And I just frankly got in the car and just went all around the state to meet as many people as I could in the industry and learn as much as I possibly could about the production of food and its distribution throughout the Commonwealth, and how many farms we had, and what the principal products of those farms were, dairy production being #1. We've got over 25,000 farm families that live in Commonwealth, so you know it's the #1 industry. It's not steel production or computer production or whatever. But the issues were not being attended to. No one was leading on some of those issues. And I remember I went over and I talked to the newly appointed Secretary of Agriculture at the time, Charlie Brosius, who was a mushroom farmer from Chester County. Great guy, great person. Had that business background too that I admired so much in governmental officials. And an older fellow, he was in his 50s at the time. And I said, Charlie, what's going on that we need to address? He said everything. He said everything. He said our dairy farmers are not getting the kind of money that they need to get to be able to sustain them and subsidize the operation of their facilities. He said the mushroom growers in Pennsylvania are being harmed by imports from other countries where the government subsidizes the growing of mushrooms. We don't get government assistance here. He said we have a very antiquated laws that affects, within the Department of Agriculture is also where the dog law is contained. And at that time you could buy a dog license. It was mandated you have a dog license, but you only paid $1. And so the entire operation was being financed by that $1 a year, of which 50 cents went back to the county treasurers or the selling agents. And the trucks were all bad. They had antiquated equipment. They were demoralized, and it just wasn't functioning the way it did. Again, you know, I don't agree in big taxes, but I agree that if you have a department by law, well, then you have to operate it. You have to operate it. And so they needed a dog license fee increase. We were able to get that done in an administration that didn't like taxes. By a chairman of the committee, it didn't like taxes either. But we had to get it done. Either that or phase out the department. And we also suffered one of the worst droughts in Pennsylvania history. And our farmers lost a great deal of their reserves by planting crops of which we had no rain for a whole summer. And so I went around the state with the Democrat chair, who was sick at the time, Italo Capabianca from Erie County. And he went as many times as he could with me. And we just, you know, at the end of August, we saw corn that was only ankle high. And yet we had a banner year under the Ridge administration with some huge surpluses. So I just, I said we need to reimburse farmers for some of their losses here. We need drought assistance. And these were emergency conditions. I don't like to give tax money to people, but we couldn't afford to lose our farms either, or see them go under. And we were able to pull, kicking and screaming, if you will, the governor into this, and the state senate into this, and say, hey, we need to make these people whole, or we're not going to have them. We're already being attacked by the suburban sprawl on the one end, and now, you know, they're getting kicked again. They can't survive. And so I was able to get a great deal of money. It was historical and unprecedented for Pennsylvania farmers and for ag producers. That was my work and the good work of my staff. And that's I want to be remembered for that primarily. Yeah. So that was great. The Consumer Affairs, I came in just as we needed to do a reauthorization of the Telephone Act. It's done every 10 years. It's very contentious. And I had two predecessors as a House Consumer Affairs chairman that did not want to do it. It involved a lot of work. So I grabbed the bull by the horns, and we got that done too. Then I was only there a short time, and I moved into leadership in January of 2004.
Mm-hmm. Something that I thought you were a little bit ahead of the game on was the agricultural terrorism, your work with that.
I worked agricultural terrorism because we saw what there's groups out there that do not feel that we should do any research on animals, nor should we grow crops that are anything other than organic. And we wouldn't have the food that we have in this country if we didn't have products that did away with pests or that were not fertilizers other than organic fertilizer. And we wouldn't have the yields per acre that we have, nor the cheap food prices. So, but I also knew that there were terrorists out there who viewed themselves as animal rights people, and that viewed themselves as people that we should only grow natural crops. And they were actually in a position to do harm and damage by making people sick and by killing the same animals that they swore to personally defend to further their cause. And so it was a growing epidemic, if you will, of terrorism towards our crops, terrorism towards animals, to stop research and to stop genetic modified crops. And we were involved in that before 2001.
That's why I said I think you were ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Well, as somebody that did not come into the Committee of Agriculture with an agricultural background, you certainly sound like you have a full command of all the issues. And I'm impressed.
I had good teachers. I had good teachers. I sought out the people that I knew could help me, and if I approached them the right way, everybody wants to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody, it depends on how somebody comes up to you. You tell them everything you can about your job, won't you?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to trust them. So I developed relationships first, and then I went and I talked to people.
What were some of the other major pieces of legislation that you worked on, not necessarily in regard to your committee work?
There were lots of things that I had introduced legislation over the years that subsequently became law, but maybe not under my my paternity, if you will. There was a bill we just did last year that provides exemption from taxation for gold and silver that is held in an investment trust, if you will. We provide those same tax incentives if you buy stocks or bonds or mutual funds, and also real estate, but we don't. There's people that are taught to keep at least 10% of your total assets in tangible products as well, like gold or silver, because you don't know what kind of conditions go on. And if you ever take any investment courses in school or at one of the night universities or even in your high schools, they do it for people that are looking for retirement. That you should have a certain amount of your assets in real estate, certain in stocks, bonds, money market, and some in tangible products. And so we were taxing them, so there was a disincentive to do that. Most of the dealers were not charging tax anyway, so whatever they were doing, they weren't doing. What they were doing was not kosher, so I wanted to make it legal. So I introduced a bill many, many years ago, and we had lots of hearings on it, but we always had some objection from the Department of Revenue that they were going to lose money. Well, they could not show us that they would, so I just let it go, and a couple of others picked the ball up over the years and did it. There was lots of legislation like that I've been involved in. Fingerprinting of newborn children, taking their fingerprints and taking their footprints. I think they always did footprints, but fingerprinting we were doing as well. And the reason it wasn't done is because people were concerned about the state or some organization being the repository of that information. And so there was a way of doing it by saying, okay, here, Mom and Dad, you get it. Mm-hmm. Okay, you get it. Because back when we were talking about it, there were lots of children being abducted. There still are today, from people who can't have a child, or, well, you read, there's at least one a month, somewhere. And so I did that with a couple of folks who are no longer here from Allegheny County. We got that done. The 911 access, imposing the $1 fee, that was a bill I'd worked on years ago. you know, it's so hard to ring my bell, if you will.
Well, like I said, I think that some of your legislation probably was done through amendments, but I mean, what a wonderful legacy that you have left.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you think was the hardest issue you ever had to face?
The one that affected me the worst was, it almost appeared to be innocuous to people. Do you mean as a legislative issue or something that I had to do legislatively?
Either. I mean that.
We had a Supreme Court justice who was mentally ill, and our Constitution doesn't make any provisions for the removal of a person like that, removal from office, except the impeachment process. And the impeachment process is a necessary process, but not for the removal from office for somebody who's sick. And so we were left with only that device of removing somebody. I took that personal. I took it personal because I disenfranchised somebody. By the impeachment process, yeah, you remove them from office, which is your ultimate goal, but you forbid them from ever holding public office. And you leave a stigma upon the record for not only them, but their whole family. I'm probably the only one that, in my memory, and I talked to the managers of the impeachment process in the House, and you know, they tried to reassure me that this was a vote that was absolutely necessary. We had to do. There was no other way of doing it, and we haven't changed it since then. And I shared that with a lot of people during that time. And I think that left me with something I always thought I did the wrong thing. I still to this day think that's the wrong way. There's got to be another way. And for those who think that mental illness is an irreversible problem, I don't believe that. Or that a physical disability is an irreversible. I don't believe that either. I'm an eternal optimist, okay? I just think we did something for the wrong reason. We achieved a goal, which was to remove him from office. And I agree he needed to leave office. I just don't agree that the impeachment process is the only one that should be made available for that. Mm-hmm. You disenfranchise them, they can't ever hold public office. They also cannot vote. And so I took that personal. On political issues, I've been frustrated many times around here. Lots of times you do all of the work and somebody else will put the bill in, and it's done for political purposes. It's either done by the opposition party, or it's done by the Senate, or it's done by maybe somebody you think won't work as hard as you do. It does matter to people. You know, I'd much rather get the job done, but by the same token, you know, when you run for re-election, you're asked, what have you done lately? Mm-hmm. And so people who come here to serve, or in Washington to serve, or go to the township supervisors, there's got to be a feather in the cap somewhere, you know? Yeah, you can talk about that which you've been involved in, or those amendments which you did, which is the same as a bill, that changed the composition of a legislation. Those sometimes are the only devices that are made available for you, but it is at least made available. But for somebody to just...
Frustrating.
It is. It is. It still is to this day.
What do you think the hardest issue is before the legislature right now? What
will be is cable competition. I don't think the gaming issue is a tough issue. I don't think the lobbyist disclosure is a major issue. If we'd stop playing politics about the moral implications of gaming, or if we stop appeasing the press on lobbyist disclosure, we can get something positive done that we need to get done. I want you to find one legislator who has gotten 3 letters or 3 phone calls from constituents who are not a member of Common Cause or are not affiliated with the Pennsylvania Newspaper Publishers Association, who has said to them, we need lobbyist disclosure. If they tell you, they're lying to you. And I'll tell them to their face they're lying. I've gotten no calls. I went to a lobbyist disclosure forum that was held by the Pennsylvania Newspaper Publishers Association, and they said, why isn't this being done? Well, it isn't being done because you want too big of an apple. You want to force lobbyists to discuss how much they pay for the electricity in their building, how much they pay for the lease of their automobile, how much they pay for their secretarial staff, how much they pay for their computer in the office, how much rent they pay, and to whom. What's that got to do with lobbying? That's their business, okay? The public only wants to know what you, the lobbyist, is spending to influence me. If you're buying me a cup of juice, and how often? If you take me to dinner, and how often and how much? If you put me on a plane to fly me somewhere, that's what the public wants to know. You want too much. And you won't settle for that which the public wants. And I said it on a live PCN broadcast, and I didn't get one negative call except from the editorialist at the Harrisburg Patriot News. And then he said to me, he didn't disagree, but sometimes you got to ask for everything. Well, not in government. You got to ask for that which is absolutely necessary, or else the public doesn't grasp it. And in the Allentown Morning Call, they did a story. Well, why won't the House do it? The Senate does it. The Senate reported $60 million last year to influence, to wine and dine those senators. Hello? There is not one member of the public that believes, even the most cynical reader of the newspaper believes that 50 senators can eat $60 million worth of food. That's why you don't have it. If you do what I just said, the public wants to know how much you spend to influence Ray Bunt, okay? Not how much you pay to have your computer in your office, okay? Mm-hmm. This stuff. Mm-hmm. And we can get there. So, but those two issues are not as important. They're reconcilable. It's just politics on both of those issues, okay? The moral implications in gaming and the politics on lobbyist disclosure. The most important issue for Pennsylvanians, for people, is that my cable is too expensive and I want choice. That may not have been the case 10 years ago. But to pay $80 a month to watch 3, 6, and 10, and a handful of others, where the quality has just sunk into the ground, and I know I'm picking on one company or another, I'm just telling you, without competition in any given area, this is what you're going to have. I would not have thought that years ago, but I do think it now. If you only had one gas station in town, they can charge whatever they want. And guess what? When they can't raise the price enough, then something's going to happen with the product. That's what's going on. Same thing happens in the pharmaceutical business, or with a pharmacy, or with a hairdresser. Same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's happened here with the cable industry. They pioneered a business, and you got to give them kudos. But technology is out there right now, and people want to take advantage of the technology, of the competition, and the service. In Boston, you can buy what's called a triple play. phone service, broadband, and cable TV for $69.95 a month for only one reason: competition. You check your cable company, I don't care who it is, you won't get triple play for $69.95. That's going to be a big issue, and the reason it's going to be a big issue is because they're big companies. You have the communication companies and the broadband industry, and they're big, they're huge. Anybody can buy Disney's big, and anybody that provides phone service is big. And so they're going to spend a lot of money, they're going to have intense lobbying, and it's going to be a nasty battle. I got involved in it to a degree this year, but I had to pull the plug on it. I just didn't have enough time before I leave.
Well, that's my next question. What would you like to see passed before you leave?
That's it, and it can't be done. So I just had to face reality and say, you know, we only have so many days left, and it just can't be done.
So someone else will have to take up that.
Somebody else has to take up, and I gave it a good battle, and I had 5 or 6 hearings across the Commonwealth this summer and early fall, and hopefully I laid the groundwork, and somebody will ask in 10 years when the bill gets done, well, who was all involved in this? Maybe they'll know me, maybe not, but at least it got done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to ask you next about the process leading up to your selection as Majority Caucus Secretary.
A position became available, and I threw my hat in the ring, and about a week later, the field was 4 candidates, and one of them was a colleague of mine from Montgomery County, who I don't ever feel was really interested. I guess he wanted to talk about something else. And then there was a Bucks County candidate, Dave Stile. Bob Gotcho was the one from Montgomery. And then Jerry Brumlin. So all those candidates were good people. And Bob Gotcho pulled down off the ballot. And Bucks County was seeking something if they couldn't get the leadership position. And no deal was made with him, and so I had to go into the race with 2 opponents, and I needed 54 votes on the first ballot to win. I only got 52 with 3 candidates. So we had to take it to the second ballot, and Dave Stile, the Bucks County candidate, dropped off because he didn't have enough votes, but he had enough votes to deny me on the first ballot. And so I went on the second ballot, and then they all got up to make it unanimous. So, but again, it wasn't a nasty battle. Just regional issues came up, parochialism. There was some concern whether it was a fight between the far right and the right of center. You know, maybe I think there's a great deal of that going on today. We have to be concerned about that in our caucus. But we were able to run a good campaign, and we were able to do it without being personal, and we were able to win because I didn't want to win at all costs, and I won.
Well, you talked about the void, and that was because of Representative Cornell's passing.
Representative Roy Cornell created a vacancy in leadership by his untimely passing. He had brain cancer. Roy and I were very good friends. We lived together here in Harrisburg in our house when we up here, good friends. We had dinner virtually every week together. He was a policy chairman, and I left a position there, and then Mario Severa then became the policy chairman, and that made the Majority Caucus Secretary position open. So that's the position I ran for, and that's the position I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the baby leadership position.
Do you like being in leadership?
Yes, I do. Yes,
Is it better than being in rank and file?
No, there's more action. Oh, yes, more than rank and file, but it's not better than being chairman of a committee.
Okay.
Yeah. chairman of committee wields a great deal of leeway, if you will, on bills that get considered or don't get considered. And you're more involved in the process. Caucus secretary, I'm the administrator of what goes on. So all the chairmen do pass reports of their committee action to me, and we put it in such a way that we make it available then to you folks at the expiration of sine die. You know, so. And I'm the holder of the record, if you will.
And you call it the baby leadership
The
post?
baby leadership, yeah, caucus secretary. It is the 5th highest constitutional leadership position. You have the Speaker of the House, and then you have, in the majority side, the majority leader, and then the whip, and then the caucus chairman, then the caucus secretary, then appropriations chairman, and policy chairman. Mm-hmm. So it's the 5th highest leadership position, and frankly, it has a history in Pennsylvania as being one of the older ones. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's another honor that's bestowed upon someone that's been here for
many years. Oh, what a great honor to be elected by your colleagues to a leadership position. The caucus, the chairman of committee is appointed by the Speaker. But to be appointed to a leadership office, you have to be elected by your colleagues. So it's an honor, a real honor. Mm-hmm. When you consider I got voted on by 109 members with a majority vote of them, that's a nice honor.
Yeah. What changes have you witnessed through the years in the House? There's probably been so many. It's almost not fair to ask.
Well, it's technologically, I think it's been beneficial. We have less paper, if you will. We have a computer system, laptop system on our desk, and I was involved in that as well. I was on a computer services committee that traveled all over. In fact, we went to California on that to see how theirs operated. Came back with a recommendation to our leadership that that's what we do, and they implemented that. I was also on that computer services committee when we were able to find a software company at the University of Montana in Missoula to draw boundaries for school district transportation, for gerrymandering our reapportionment. Mm-hmm. Basically, GIS systems. And so I've been fortunate to be, if not the point person, at least part of the team, mm-hmm. part of a small team, that made some monumental changes around here. Some people will say I operated on the peripheral of all that. You say what you want, but I was there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so,
has technology helped or hindered the House?
I think technology always is of assistance, and I think it's helped a great deal. I'm not so sure if I controlled the decision of having TV coverage in the House that we'd still have it. I think that's been a major deterrence to maintaining an orderly House. There will be people who say, well, we need to see what's going on. I don't think that's necessary. If that was so, we'd all be mandated to watch everything all the time. So there are many times when I think there's more pontification on an issue than should be. And if we didn't have the cameras, I know for a fact it would not happen, because I've been here before we had it. And I've had occasions to just walking in unannounced into some of my colleagues' offices, not recently, but certainly at time of implementation, where I've seen them just admiring themselves on the cable systems. and I kid them about it. But That I think we could do away with that. We should do away with it, but I don't think it's going to happen.
When you think about your experiences in the House, do you have a favorite story?
I don't have a favorite story. They're all story. I could tell you a story about lots of things. Every day's a story. Some of them are late night sessions, and some of them are tough votes where we've made a joke of them. Not that they were just tough political votes, you know. And but yeah, try to add some humor to it to lessen some of the proverbial shit going to hit the fan, you know. And I hate to use that term, but it's certainly descriptive. Gaynor Coley figures into a whole lot of some of the most interesting times, because I think he's been here the whole time I've been here, and when we needed humor, he provided it. And I know I'm not going to be the only person to sit here to tell you he's not been involved in most of it. Bill DeWeese, John Prezone, lots of interesting stories. But it would take me a month, and I know we can't do that.
Well, what aspect of your job have you liked the most?
I guess, as I remarked to you earlier, just being in a position to be able to be of assistance when people need help. Generally, when people call their elected official, I don't mean this in a negative way, they're scratching the bottom of the barrel because they're frustrated, okay? Mm-hmm. And most times they've exercised every avenue that they feel is available to them to try to do it by themselves. Most people want to do everything by themselves. And so when they call you, they're really frustrated. I mean, really frustrated. And maybe mad, too, because they haven't been able to take care of it themselves, okay? Boy, it's a nice feeling. I mean, it's a better feeling than getting a paycheck, really, when you're able to call somebody and say, you know, what you've been so upset about, we got some action here, okay? And this is what happened. This is why it happened. And geez, don't lose the faith, you know?
Any special projects in your district?
Oh, I've gotten red lights where none of my predecessors could have gotten red lights up, traffic signals, lots of bridges, virtually every bridge in my district. It's those kinds of issues. I've never been really interested in being a bill writer, if you will. I'll do what needs to be done, but I'd much rather make provisions for my district, and I see my role not as a legislator, but more as a state representative. Some person that people have elected to be their spokesman and to do things in their behalf, okay? Most times the people have and want access to them does not deal with legislation. Really, it doesn't. They want you to make contacts on their behalf. And if somebody's cynical about that, I'm just telling you the way it is. And you won't feel any differently about it until you make that call to your legislator, too, to see just what they can or can't do. And even if they can't, if they can document what they have tried to do, you'll be much more appreciative of the job, maybe not the person.
What have you liked the least?
The loss of camaraderie here, the loss of the interaction, if you will. The win at all costs campaigns, the personal attacks that I've seen, you know, both sides do. I'm not here to criticize one party or the other or one person or this. I think once you go down that road, I don't know how you get back from it. I don't know if you can have a gentleman's agreement without, you know, you break that gentleman's agreement, how do you ever put it back together again? You know?
How would you like to be remembered?
I made a difference. Yep, I made a difference.
You've talked a little bit about your plans after leaving the House. Would you like to elaborate any more?
Well, my mother's going to be 88 years old, and I love her dearly. She lives in Florida, and I need to see her, okay? And I need to spend time with her. And so I'm going to go down to see her, and I want to travel out west a little bit. So basically, I want to do anything for 3 months. And then I've talked to some folks in industry and see maybe I can do something in government relations or consulting. I can't lobby the House for a period of a year. I certainly can the Senate and the executive branch. Most of the congressional delegation in Washington I served with at one time or another here. I know them all on a first-name basis. The senators the same way, state senators here. And I've been involved in most of the races as well. So if I can't do that, some consulting work. But just anything that keeps me from sitting in a rocking chair, I don't want to do that either, okay? But I can assure you I'm going to do some traveling, but I do want to work. I've been working since I was 14, and I got to work.
Do you have any advice that you can bestow upon new representatives that will be taking their seats very soon?
Take the time to listen. Take the time to develop friendships and relationships. If you say you're only going to come here for 2 years, don't come here at all. If you say you're going to come here for 2 or 3 terms, don't come here at all. If you want to say that only your ideas are reform ideas, don't come at all. I don't know how you build anything by destroying it. It's not the way I've seen life. And if they come up here with that idea that they can destroy the institution has been going on since 1681 in some form or fashion. But be careful what you ask for and be careful what you do, because it just may work and it will take a long time to straighten out again. If you look at the history of Pennsylvania since 1681, we have had some form of limited constitutional changes because of some populist concern or movement that it's come up. Every adoption of a reform is an adoption of a previous practice that was done away with 40 years ago. Okay? So you will set us back. And each constitutional convention has set us back. And so a lot of what's going on is concern about the war, is concerned about high utility costs or energy costs, concern about loss of their pensions or health care, and the reforms are a whip that you did it. Well, that's not true. We're all victims of everything that goes on, okay? Elected officials' families go to the war in Iraq and get killed. Or elected officials go to Iraq to serve. We pay the high gas prices too. And so, who is the whipping boy? We're all in this together. Let's find solutions, not whipping boys, you know? And I just hope we learn a lesson quicker and sooner than what I think we're going to.
Well, that concludes our interview. Thank you
so much.
much.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.